Welcome to episode number 46 of the American Regularis Podcast. I'm your host, J.D. Walter, and we have a great podcast in store for you today. Lots to get into, lots of interesting stuff. Before we do it, though, hit the like and subscribe button. Follow me wherever you're at, Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, wherever you're at. Like the video, tell your friends, and follow me on Twitter at reg_American1. And if you want to contact me, get to email me at americanregularispodcast@gmail.com. We have so much to get into. We're going to have to be brief on a few things because this Trump administration, don't say they're not busy. Don't say they're loafing about. We're not even going to touch Doge today, and every single day, what Doge is uncovering, I mean, a guy could have a podcast every day just about Doge. We're not going to touch that. Today, we're going to focus on the foreign policy bit, which, as you remember, this is where I've been most critical of Donald J. Trump overall for his stances in Gaza and stuff. Today, we're going to be focusing outside of Gaza for the most part, and it's mostly positive. These are things that I believe help redeem him some. Now, I don't think you can just blow off what's going on with Israel and the stuff we talked about last time. However, I'm going to give credit where credit's due again. Trump continues to impress me in a lot of the things he's doing. Just to be blunt about it, like unobjectively. I just didn't think he would do so good. And of course, the things that I like will be dragged by the left-wing media, by proponents of big government, be they Democrats or Republicans, and we will talk about that too. When I'm talking about this foreign policy stuff, lots going on, particularly with Russia and what's going on in the Ukraine war. The first thing that I thought was great, a few months ago, we had a couple of podcasts here where I was pretty doom and gloom, and I'm saying, look, nuclear war is as close as it's been since the Cuban Missile Crisis, and I was not unfounded. I was not wrong in saying that. Things were bleak with the Biden administration and Blinken and these guys that just wanted to push the envelope right up to that red line, just obstinately. Okay? Now, Trump's supposed to be the bullheaded guy that doesn't think about anything, and look, maybe there's some truth to that. But comparing him to the Biden administration, Anthony Blinken and all those guys, he seems much more measured and thoughtful on this. The first clip we're going to get into today, we've got several clips, is him talking about his plans moving forward with denuclearization. Now, this should undoubtedly be a nonpartisan thing that everyone should agree on. I doubt that will be the case. But we're going to listen to what Trump has to say about his plans going forward as president with the nuclear arms program, with military spending in general. And we'll give him a listen, and then I'll share you my thoughts.
At some point, when things settle down, I'm going to meet with China, and I'm going to meet with Russia in particular, those two, and I'm going to say there's no reason for us to be spending almost $1 trillion on military. There's no reason for you to be spending $400 billion. China's going to be at $400 billion. We're at $1 trillion. We're going to be at close to $1 trillion. And I'm going to say, we can settle this on, we can spend this on other things. We don't have to spend this on military and I'm going to be meeting with China. You know, we were trying to de-escalate nuclear, and I was in a position where Russia had agreed and China had agreed we were going to start, and then we had a rigged election, so that never took place. As soon as things settle down, I'm going to have that conference, primarily with China and Russia, because those are the two that really are out there. And we're going to have them spend a lot less money, and we're going to spend a lot less money. And I know they're going to do it. They agreed to it. We were talking about denuclearizing, and President Putin and I agreed that we were going to do it in a very big way. There's no reason for us to be building brand new nuclear weapons. We already have so many. You could destroy the world 50 times over, 100 times over. And here we are building new nuclear weapons, and they're building nuclear weapons, and China's building new nuclear weapons. Hopefully, there'll never be a time when we need those weapons. If there's ever a time when we need nuclear weapons, like the kind of weapons that we're building and that Russia has and that China has to a lesser extent, but will have, that's going to be a very sad day. That's going to be probably oblivion.
All right. Now, he kind of channeled George W. Bush there a little bit, had a real hard time saying denuclearization. We're going to denuclearize, denuke them, whatever. But good. Now, as you heard him say, and as is objectively the truth, whether it's 50 times or 100 times or 10 times, it really doesn't matter. Anything over enough nukes to destroy the entire world once is superfluous and unnecessary. And he says, look, we've already got more nukes than we need to destroy God's green earth. So why are we still building these? So while this is, I think, arguably mostly an economic argument, right? Why are we spending money on something we don't need? We have enough nukes to blow up the world. At that point, we should be able to call it good. We shouldn't need any more. That's pretty obvious. But people get into these arms races. Russia, China, they're the biggest nuclear powers. Look, we all have enough nukes. Let's all agree on that. Let's spend our money somewhere else. And if we can all come to the table on that, good. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to run out of nukes and they're going to run out of nukes and that the threat of nuclear war won't still be there. But at least now the conversation is, let's stop building them. Maybe reduce them some. Maybe we can argue like, hey, we've got 50 times. What if we get down to where we only have 10 times the amount of nukes? Maybe this is or will serve as an impetus to really denuclearize the arms race, right? To actually see a reduction in nukes. Are we going to get it down to, hey, look, we can't destroy the world anymore? I doubt it. But Rome wasn't built in a day. It could be destroyed in a day. So let's do that. Let's work to get less nukes, or at least stop building new nukes. And now we've got these positive negotiations and agreements going on with the three strongest, largest nuclear powers with the biggest armies, and they're agreeing on saying, let's spend less, not only on nukes, but he says the military. We spend over $1 trillion. They're spending $400 billion. Why don't we focus on peace? And by focusing on peace, we can focus on spending our money elsewhere, or, nudge, nudge, not spending it. That would be great. Maybe start chipping away at this debt. But absolutely good. Absolutely great there. You'll hear opponents come up with something on this, but who's going to disagree with this? I would love to see the left's argument for why we need to fund the military-industrial complex more. It'll be because Putin's an existential threat and he's literally Hitler. That's all they've got. Now, still doesn't win the argument because we have enough nukes to blow up the world. So, if we decide that Putin is so much like Hitler that the world needs blowing up, we can do that. Obviously, it's the worst take in the world, but their argument has no legs, is what I'm getting at. It shows you just how there's just no way you should be able to oppose this. There will be war hawks, obviously. Lindsey Graham won't like this idea, and I'm sure there will be someone on the left that won't like it strictly because it's Trump's idea. But, okay, great. We can tell China to spend less on their military, Russia less on theirs, us less on ours. Win, win, win. Isn't that what that is like a classic Trump little saying? He's like, oh, we all win this way and that way, and it's the greatest plan ever. It's a pretty simple plan, and it is good. Flat out. Now, he talked about those nukes. The next part I want to talk about is related to nukes or I guess nuclear energy and what's going on in Ukraine, right? We're getting closer to the end of the war. Naturally, every day is always closer to the end of something, as nothing is infinite. But peace talks, negotiations, settlements, they're supposed to be coming. Trump wanted to do that within his first 100 days. And the Russians continued to advance in different places. It's called Constantinople, not the one any history nerds or anyone with a minor grasp of history would be thinking about. But at Constantinople and Ukraine, they're pushing there. They're pushing in on a few other places. And they're continuing to wear down the Ukrainian army. As the Ukrainians get more desperate and as peace talks get closer and closer, this is an ideal time to see an increased risk for false flag attacks. If you don't know what that is when someone attacks themselves, more or less. The government attacks something or sabotages something. Nord Stream pipeline would be a great example. Or Operation Northwoods was a false flag attack that was put forward to JFK. It never went through, right, to start a war with Cuba, infamously. These things happen. False flag attacks happen usually to sway public opinion, right? Now, Zelensky is extremely unpopular right now, as we'll hear Trump talk about shortly. The war's getting desperate. The Ukrainians want to fight less than ever. The Americans want to fund it less than ever. Seems like everyone but the Ukraine government and the Europeans, seems like everyone else wants out of this, right? Now, because the Ukrainian government, Zelensky's regime, is still chomping at the bit for this stuff, I think it's very likely to see false flag attacks, and we may have just seen one, right? There are reports, and the Ukrainians are saying that Russia sent a drone to attack Chernobyl of nuclear disaster fame, and this would be huge, right? Oh, they're trying to have a nuclear event happen with drones instead of just straight out nuking us or whatever. It just shows you how crazy and maniacal Putin is, and no one buy it for a second. We have to realize, no matter what the morality of Putin is or what your stance on him is, he is not unintelligent, and he's not without stratagem or tactics. He would never do this. He would gain nothing by that. He's winning the war. There's no need for something desperate. There's no need for something inflammatory to the world. This is like when Assad allegedly gassed his own people. Now, it was rebuffed by, I don't remember, whatever unbiased foreign commission said, no, it doesn't look like he did it. But it was a talking point to go after Assad. This is the same thing. This, in my opinion, is more likely a false flag attack that the Ukrainians committed, and then they did it unsuccessfully, probably purposefully, to avoid the nuclear disaster, but then say, look, the Russians tried, but they failed. So, as we get closer to these peace talks, don't be surprised if more and more extreme events happen, if more and more desperation breeds chaos, because that's what it's going to do. And this next part, we're going to listen to Trump talk about Zelensky, talk about his meeting in, I believe it was Saudi Arabia or Iran. Forgive me for not knowing. But they went and met. Zelensky was not there. A lot of people complained about that. Of course, they had earlier had a peace summit for the Ukraine-Russian war, and they didn't invite Russia. So take that with a grain of salt. But we're going to hear a very interesting clip. And I think Trump's response, with one glaring obvious weakness, was pretty good and measured. And I think it really signifies a beginning to the end of the Russo-Ukrainian war. So this clip is a little bit longer, so I'm going to pause during it here and there to talk to you fine folks about what it is we're hearing and you know, the good, the bad, and the ugly, which is, like I said, mostly good.
Thank you. Yes.
We're hearing that Russia wants to force Ukraine to hold new elections in order to sign any kind of a peace deal. Is that something that the U.S. would ever support?
So right off the bat, listen to this lady. She sounds like she hates democracy. Now, of course, Trump's one that hates democracy. Everyone knows that. The media's told us that for the last however many years. But we heard the Russians want to force Ukraine to hold elections. Is that something the U.S. would ever do, would ever support? This whole thing was about Ukraine being the shining city on the hill for democracy ever since, we helped overthrow their government in 2014 and let them elect the people that we like. And here she is saying, Look at this. Putin's plan. He wants the Ukrainian people, to be able to vote for their president. That's anti-democratic. We're here. We need Zelensky in here to preserve democracy. We can't have a bunch of elections and voting going out and ruining democracy.
Well, we have a situation where we haven't had elections in Ukraine, where we have martial law, essentially martial law in Ukraine, where the leader in Ukraine, I mean, I hate to say it, but he's down at 4% approval rating, and where a country has been blown to smithereens. You got most of the cities are laying on their sides. The buildings are collapsed. It looks like a massive demolition site. So many of the cities. I mean, they haven't done it in Kiev because I guess they don't want to shoot too many rockets in there. They've done it 20%, but they haven't done it 100%. If they wanted to do it 100%, it would probably happen very quickly. But you have cities that are absolutely decimated. And yeah, I would say that, when they want a seat at the table, you could say the people wouldn't the people of Ukraine have to say, it's been a long time since we've had an election. That's not a Russia thing. That's something coming from me and coming from many other countries also. Ukraine is being just wiped out. Look at what's happening to the cities. There are cities, there's not even a building standing. It's a massive, you talk about Gaza. I mean, it's literally, these cities look like Gaza.
Okay, so you're going to hear my critique here. First off, he's right on a lot of this. Now, I don't know if the Russians are holding back on Kiev or if it's just where their weapons aren't best used, or if they're trying to preserve the city, or if they have the ordnance that can reach from that far back. I don't know about that. He's saying, they're doing 20%. They could do more. Maybe Putin told him that. Maybe that's true. Maybe that's false. I don't know. But listen to him describe these cities. And he's absolutely right on it. He's like, these things look like a demolition site, a catastrophe. It looks like it's just rubble. It looks like Gaza, right? He's talking about how disastrous, how he can convey just how terrible this place is. And the only example he can provide is it looks like the place that we're funding and aiding in the destruction of, which just sucks because, yes, Trump, you're absolutely right. This war is terrible and it needs to end for that reason. And you provide a great comparison. And yet it just goes over the head of Trump that maybe the people in Gaza aren't super excited about having their cities turned into rubble and demolition projects. That part is just terrible. Now, the other part, he talks about how unpopular Zelensky is, which is true. People are, look, that brand new brigade or battalion from France, 20%, 20 to 30%, they ran off before they even got to the front line. Troops aren't going and fighting. It is a lost cause. And not only do the troops know it, but all the people at home who have sons and fathers dying for the Russians. And it's just forlorn hope. There is none. They're against it now, right? They didn't want to lose, but they know they're going to. And so, yes, they are no longer supporting Zelensky like they would have been on the outset because, quite frankly, these deaths are going to be, vainglorious? All right, going on. But unbelievable that Trump doesn't recognize that when he says it. It's a great point, but he could take something more away from it.
Actually, many have, percentage-wise, more buildings knocked down than in Gaza. So, people are tired of it. People want to see something happen. And, the other thing that it's been bothering me for a long time because I solved the problem with NATO. They paid hundreds of billions of dollars into the funds of NATO when I said you got to pay because the United States was paying for European countries and then they take advantage of us on trade. But I've seen it. Look, they have to pay. They have to find out where's the money going to. We have, I believe President Zelensky said last week that he doesn't know where half of the money is that we gave him. Well, we gave them, I believe, $350 billion, but let's say it's something less than that, but it's a lot. And we have to equalize with Europe because Europe has given a very much smaller percentage than that. I think Europe has given $100 billion and we've given, let's say, 300 plus, and it's more important for them than it is for us. We have an ocean in between, and they don't. But
all right, we're going to end it on that, but he brings up a good point. Again, he's saying, hey, the Europeans need to pay for it as much as we do. We're paying at a 3-to-1, charitably, 3-to-1. And Zelensky says he doesn't know where half the money went. Look, this isn't surprising to us. We see this all the time in these Western governments. They talk about how uncorrupt they are because maybe some cop doesn't shake you down when he pulls you over. But the level of corruption is wild. We see this with USAID. We see this with Social Security. Everything Elon Musk is showing just shows just how corrupt on such a massive scale it is and fraudulent. And this war is no different. There's been so many times where the Ukrainians went to go find whatever their defenses were, and whoever was contracted out to provide the dragon's teeth or dig the trenches, it's just not there. Or they're just sitting in a pile, and they never handed them out. The corruption's been very widespread. There's a lot of guys getting rich off Ukrainian men dying. I'll tell you that right now. You can take that to the bank. Now, Trump's focusing on how Europe needs to pay more. The main focus should be, look, you guys aren't even using this wisely. This is a racket from an unelected, his election expired over a year ago, from a guy in martial law that's refusing to hold elections. And this money is not being used efficiently for the safety of the troops or the effectiveness of the assaults and defenses in the war. What does that look like? Right? Now, the original question to get into this was a lady trying to make it a Putin talking point for Ukraine to have democracy when this entire war has been predicated on the fact that Ukraine is a democratic state that must be preserved. We all recognize this as nonsense, at least if you're listening to this podcast and have any sort of agreement with me. And the final thing we're going to get into today really kind of carries over into this bickering or argument or this false characterization of what is democratic. Who is defending freedom? Who's defending Western principles, right? Which is becoming a more and more hard thing to identify as you look at so many Western governments and populations who seem to have cast aside traditional beliefs. Which leads us to what I would normally say in past administrations would be a very boring topic. And that is a vice president speaking at a Munich Security Conference, the Munich Security Conference. So, what is that? Well, people go to Germany, and a bunch of government guys go to Germany, and they talk about how to keep Europe and America and NATO and EU or whatever else safe. Right? Security-wise, presumably. Now, it's usually a bunch of empty talking points, and we all agree, and look at us. We're saving the world with our being, sleazy politicians. It would usually dry paint on the wall. I can't imagine how boring a Kamala Harris speech would have been at a Munich. Maybe there was one. We never heard about it because, unless she had some sort of inane rambling, we never heard about it. It never made waves. Likewise, if Kamala Harris had won the presidency and Tim Walz went in there to talk to the Munich Security Council or conference, whatever the heck it is, I just keep getting conference and council mixed up. It would have been boring. Shucks, guys. I'm just an old Midwestern guy, but it seems like, the status quo and all the neoliberalism we're doing is just spot on. We got to keep it up. Putin's a bad egg, Like it would just be terrible. I can't imagine how empty and how many platitudes would be there. Instead, J.D. Vance put a bunch of eye black under his face. He he tied down his cleats right onto his shoes, put his pads on, and he went out there just hit, kill. Like he was fired up. He was looking to kick butt and chew bubblegum. And, old J.D. Vance didn't have any bubblegum. He went after the European governments so well. He took them to task on the things they were failing at. When he goes to the security conference, he doesn't say, look, we got to worry about Russia and Putin is Hitler, which, was That's what you're supposed to say. He didn't want to talk about any of this fear-mongering. He said, look, I think the greatest threat to the Europeans right now are you guys. You guys are doing undemocratic things and things against the very foundations of Western values, freedom of speech. And they just had a thing on 60 Minutes where CBS goes in and these Germans are just going, yeah, if you say something bad, that's a crime. You can't, you can't say anything that's bad, and that's a crime. And if it's on the internet, then it's there forever, and that makes it even worse of a crime. Yeah, you must go to jail, straight to jail. And like CBS just nods and agrees and is like, oh, thoughtful. They don't say that's absolutely crazy. That's why we fought the Brits or whatever. They just listen. It was insane. Watch that and just see if it's not. So J.D. Vance goes in there and he says, people shouldn't be in jail for what they're saying. And he says, people have been voting and pleading to stop these disastrous neoliberal immigration policies. You guys are ruining your countries with immigration policies. It's causing an increase in crime. Your people don't want it, and you need to respect the voice of the people. He then goes on to really lambaste him for Romania, where they basically nullified a Romanian election because the guy was bad. And when Vance is doing this, you could hear a pin drop. He'd do all these applause breaks. At one point, he even makes a joke. They cheer him at the beginning when he says something about democracy. And he's like, I'm glad you guys applauded that. It might be the last time I get applause. And after that, any perceived applause break, there's just a spattering of 2 to 3 people. Maybe they're from Hungary or Poland or somewhere a little more based that are clapping for him. It is crickets throughout. So this next part, I'm going to play a little bit of J.D. Vance talking, and then I am going to play a small segment of a response by one of these annoying little German government guys.
No voter on this continent went to the ballot box to open the floodgates to millions of unvetted immigrants. But you know what they did vote for? In England, they voted for Brexit, and agree or disagree, they voted for it. And more all over Europe, they're voting for political leaders who promise to put an end to out-of-control migration.
All right. So that's the first little clip of J.D. Vance's speech. I encourage you to go listen to the whole thing. It was awesome. It was very good. Now, the next is a response by the Munich Security Conference summit chairman, whatever he wants to, however. It's a German guy named Christoph Husken. And let's listen to his rebuttal to what I think was a very powerful and articulate speech by J.D. Vance. Let's listen to this guy's rhetoric and oratory prowess and how he responds. And hopefully his philosophy comes through and he has some pretty poignant counter arguments to what Vice-President Vance had to say.
So let us stick to these values. Let us not reinvent them, but focus on strengthening their consistent application. Let me conclude, and this becomes difficult.
Oh, yeah, it's so sad. I have to weep. Yeah, these are my crocodile tears. And I don't have anything good to say. I just need to cry. And perhaps you can bail me out with some applause. Danke. Yeah, so pathetic, right? The very fact that J.D. Vance came in there and spoke openly and honestly about one of the most severe problems that all of Europe has, not just Germany, but Germany first and foremost as much as anyone above them. This guy resorts to a child's stratagem of crying and appealing to sympathy, which is kind of a leftist thing to do, so we shouldn't be too surprised to see it in Europe. But he doesn't combat or refute. He just says, no, our principles are good, and he hurt my feelings. Absolutely, man, I love European history. I absolutely love it. I like German culture in particular and German history in particular because my ancestry is mostly German, and so it made me always interested in it. My word, is it so easy to just hate on these Europeans. They are so high and mighty so often, and they look down their noses at us simple Americans because we wear baseball hats and whatever. We put ketchup on the wrong thing or something, and we're just a bunch of, uncultured ruffians, right, from the Western Hemisphere. And then you see what they have just devolved into, which are these, and not all of them, but their government officials are among the worst. And guess what? Europe knows this, right? Every year, let's take Germany, for instance. Each election we've seen in the past few elections, who is gaining more traction than anybody? The AfD, right? The Alternative für Deutschland, right? This is their MAGA movement, or MADA, or what would it be? Whatever. Make Deutschland great again, or Deutschland first. This is that movement, right? They want strong borders. They want to focus economically on the people. It's most in line with, I guess, I wouldn't go so far as to say libertarian, but certainly more in line with libertarian than any of the major parties of Europe. But they're more of a, like, an American first view, but for Germany. And they are lambasted, and they're trying to cut off their funds, and they're trying to disband them because they're growing in popularity, and why they speak all the time about the beauty of democracy. As soon as they see that the AfD is gaining traction and popularity, particularly in East Germany, in the old Soviet blocks, it seems like Saxony and Thuringen, these guys are just doing everything they can to not give the people a chance to vote for an alternative. Literally, the Alternative für Deutschland. So, this is just Slimy 101. Watch the whole thing. J.D. Vance's speech was powerful. And if you are anyone in Europe, and like I said, I was talking a little shade on the Europeans earlier, that's at large, and it's mostly from the government. I really don't want you to judge me by my government, that's for sure. So if you're listening in Germany or the UK or anything, man, I'm right there with you. I'm rooting for you guys so damn hard. But, man, your officials, your bureaucrats and politicians are just terrible. And it just seems like I just want to shake you guys and just say, God, we got to, you guys got to get back to, there's so much history and culture and wonderful things that have happened in the Western world throughout history. And it's to repudiate everything good because your government tells you it might be racist or not quite fair. It's yeah, but look, everybody's got their thing. We can certainly look at Germany's history or England's history or America's history and find plenty to criticize. But let's dance with the girl that brought you, right? There's a lot of good things that have happened historically in these countries and that their cultures and beliefs, right, had done to shape their culture and their people and their history. And you got to return to the good stuff. Yeah, ignore the bad stuff, or don't ignore it, but avoid it. Don't return to it, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, Europe. I think J.D. Vance's call to action by these guys won't go heard. It fell on deaf ears in that crowd, but hopefully all the Europeans with common sense hear this and really fight to demand more from their government. I would love to see the AfD come out on top in Germany. I would love for different movements in Europe, particularly Western Europe, to see less of such a skew towards the neoliberals. All right. I'm rooting for you guys, and I'm rooting for America as always, and I'm rooting for everyone who likes and subscribes. Thank you for listening. Take care. We'll catch you on the next one.